In a Khan Academy tutorial, Sal Khan demonstrates how to do these subtraction problems in your head, or by thinking about subtraction in a different way other than the traditional algorithm or the traditional way of doing it. So I wanted to offer another variation or twist on that method that might resonate a little bit more. So that's what this tutorial is intended to do. What we're going to do is we're going to think about counting up from this number to get to this number. So for example, counting up from 169 to figure out how many steps or how many numbers or what distance is between 169 and 301. Another approach that I'm going to introduce in this tutorial is making the numbers, especially this top one, be prettier for your brain. So just to share that it's possible to change these numbers around so that it's easier for you to get numbers that you would rather work with. So here goes. First of all, I just want to show you why we're allowed to do this. So let's think about a smaller set of numbers. So imagine that you have 22 minus 5. And so the approach we're going to think about first is, could we just subtract 2 from 22 to make it a cuter number? And then as long as we do the same thing to the 5, that it still works out just fine and we get the same answer. So what I'd like you to think about doing is subtracting the same number from 22 and 5. In this case, if you compare 22 to 20, we subtracted 2. So in this case, we're just subtracting 2 from both numbers. So 22 minus 2 is 20. We have to keep things balanced. So 5 minus 2 is 3. And let me show you that this really does work. So I wanted to show you that we're allowed mathematically to change these numbers and nothing bad happens. So say we start out at 22 minus 5. So we start at 22, and let's just say that we want to end up at 5, since that's the other number mentioned in the subtraction problem. If you're looking at the difference between 22 and 5, or the space between those numbers, it's a space of 17, which is why 22 minus 5 is 17. And you can see that here too, that this bar represents the distance between 22 and 5, and it is 17 jumps. If you counted these all these little steps, there would be 17 steps. So check this out. If we take these 17 jumps, or this distance, and we move it from 22 down to 20, it still stays 17 jumps. The size of the bar hasn't changed. So it just shows us now that 20, our new starting point, is the same distance from 3 as 22 was from 5. So doing this change, going from 22 minus 5 to 20 minus 3, doesn't change anything. It gives us the same exact subtraction answer or difference as 17. So another way you can think about this is in the jumps. So let's go back to 22 minus 5. If you start at 22, because of the starting point here, and you take 5 jumps in the negative or left direction, look where you'll end up. 22 minus 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We end up at 17. Now look at this. If we start at 20 and go 3 jumps to the left or in the negative direction, look where we'll end up. So starting at 20 and taking 3 jumps for 20 minus 3. 1, 2, 3. And again, we end up at 17. So that just shows that this expression or equation and this equation are the same. They both equal 17. So now we've established that we're allowed to do that. We're allowed to take 22 minus 5, or any subtraction problem that you face, and you can rearrange or restate the expression in a different but equal way. So in this case, just to review, we were subtracting 2 from both numbers, and so we subtracted 2 from 22 and got 20. We subtracted 2 from 5 and got 3. And we established that we get the same answer of 17 for both of these expressions. So these two expressions are equivalent. So let's apply this to those larger numbers. So in this case, the first example that's mentioned in the Khan Academy tutorial is 301 minus 169. And you don't have to do this step where you make the top number cuter, but I like to. So that's the method that I'll share with you. So in the case of 301, I would rather think about it as a nice even number. So I'm going to go for 300. So to get from 301 to 300, I just have to subtract 1. So I'm going to subtract 1 from 301 and from 169 because we have to change both numbers so the space between the numbers stays the same, like I showed you on the number line. So we're going to make each of these numbers 1 less. So 301 becomes 300, and 169 becomes 168. So let's do that for a couple more numbers, and then I'll show you the next step. So in this case, you could go a few different routes. You could change this top number of 913 to 910 by subtracting 3. I'm going to go all the way and make it 900. I'm all in. So I'm going to subtract 13 from both of the numbers. So I'm going to subtract 13 from each number. So 913 becomes 900. And then 286 becomes 273. And then if you don't feel comfortable doing that math in your head, that's perfectly fine. And what you can do is you can take the little bit of this number that you're dealing with, in this case 86. You could take 286 too, but I'm just going to deal with the 86 and subtract 13. And 6 minus 3 is 3. 8 minus 1 is 7. And you can see that we did get 73. Just like here, we got 273. That's all balanced and ready to roll. Let's do one more. This is the last example that's in the Khan Academy tutorial. So we're looking at 721 minus 88. And if you're looking for nice, pretty numbers, you could subtract 1 to get 720, or you could subtract 21 to get an even 700. It's really your preference. In this case, I think I'll just go with subtracting 1. But you really can choose any number you want, whatever makes sense for you. So subtracting 1 from 721, I get 720. And subtracting 1 from 88, I get 87. So now we're ready to do the next step, the actual subtraction. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, I would rather do addition than subtraction. So I like to think of subtraction as through an addition lens. So in this case, I'm going to start with 168, and I'm going to add things until I get up to 300. So here we go. We're going to start with 168. And we're going to add things, add numbers, until we get up to 300. So in this case, I'm going to start by adding 2. Because adding 2 gets me to 170. And that 0 at the end just makes my brain happy. And now I'm thinking about this number, 170, and I'm thinking if I added 30, I'd be at a nice even 200. We're getting close. And then if I add another 100, I have reached my goal. I have reached my goal of 300. So now that you've done this addition, right, how do I answer the question? How do I know what the subtraction answer is, or the difference? What you do is you look at all the numbers you added. So in my case, I added 100, I added 30, and I added 2. And if you add those together, the 100, the 30, and the 2, you get 132. And that is the answer, or the difference, when you subtract. It's the answer for this subtraction problem, and it's also the answer for this subtraction problem. Because we did the same thing to both sides when we were preparing for this problem. You can check it on a calculator. It's the same for both. Let's try a second example. The second example from the Khan Academy video. So we started with 913 minus 286. We decided to subtract 13 from both sides, leaving us with 900 minus 273. So now we just have to figure out the difference between 900 and 273. So starting with 273, we're going to add until we get to 900. So I'm going to start by adding 7. You wouldn't have to add 7. You could start by adding 2 if you wanted to get to 275, but I'm going to go with 7. And that gets me up to 280. And I see that if I added 20 more, that would get me up to 300. And now that we're at 300 and we want to get to 900, if we add 600, we'll be at our goal. Because now we're at 900. So to figure out what the total difference is between 900 and 273, or between these numbers, because it's the same answer, we're going to add together 600, 20, and 7. And if you listen to that, you can hear the answer. If you add together 600, 20, and 7, you're going to get 627. And that is the answer to this subtraction problem and this subtraction problem. And now for one last example. 721 minus 88, we transformed that to 720 minus 87 by subtracting 1 from both sides. Now we just need to start at 87 and add until we get up to 720. So starting at 87, let's add 3 to start off, because that will get us to a nice even beautiful 90. And then what I'm thinking of doing is I'm thinking of adding 10 just to get myself to 100. So I'm adding 10 to get to 100. And then I see, hey, I want to get to 700 something, so I'm going to add 600. That will get me to 700. And then I want to get to 720, so I'm going to add 20 more, because that will get me to 720. And then as the final step, we just figure out what we added. We added 20. We added 600. we added 10, and we added 3. And so altogether, we added 633. And that is the difference, or the answer, on both of these subtraction problems, this one and this one. I hope that helps and gives you just a different way to look at subtraction maybe, especially subtraction of larger kind of strange numbers. Another thing you should know is that if you don't want to, you don't have to do this whole subtracting the same number from both numbers step. If you wanted to use the adding strategy, you could do it right from this formulation of the subtraction problem. So let's just take 913 minus 286. If you didn't want to do this step here, you could start with 286 and just jump right into the adding. So in this case, adding 4, which would get you to 290. And then maybe adding 10 to get you to 300. And just to remind you, we're looking to get to 913 because we started with 286. If I add 600, that gets me to 900, almost there. And then to get the rest of the way to 913, I add 13. And that gets me to 913. Now if we add these up, we added 4, we added 10, we added 600, and we added 13. And if you add those numbers up, you get 627, just as we did before. 3 plus 4 is 7, 1 plus 1 is 2, and then 6. So 627. So you can just use the adding strategy if you want. You don't have to do this step, but especially when I'm doing math in my head, I find that having a nice even number to aim for really helps me out. So I hope it helps you too. Thank you. Bye.